All right, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, this Cowboys team has made a lot of big moves this offseason, none bigger, at least in terms of grabbing the headlines, than the trade, the acquisition of wide receiver George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course. It happened a few months ago now. And as we are getting closer to training camp, we've just recently received some evidence that should make Cowboys fans even more excited about this direction of this team. Certainly the trade, the dealing, the acquiring of Pickens. We'll get to this latest stuff in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, of course, Cowboys fans, you're all very well aware of it at this point. George Pickens will be a Cowboy for this season and potentially longer. The Cowboys made a big headline-grabbing deal a while ago now to, of course, add Pickens to their roster. But when you look at what's happened recently with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's a sign that the Cowboys pulled off a really massive move, even bigger and smarter than people think. Let's pull up this little graphic right here to remind people of another deal the Pittsburgh Steelers made over the past week, and that was trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, their safety, to the Miami Dolphins. In return, they received as part of a couple little deals. It was kind of a weird thing here. They got Jonnu Smith, the tight end, and cornerback Jalen Ramsey, and of course, the mid to late round draft picks exchange hands as well. So the big takeaway here is if you follow anyone into the Pittsburgh Steelers, and if you look deep into what's going on in Pittsburgh, a lot of people are thinking like, what are they doing? Why are they trading? Just it seems like they're getting nowhere, right? They're reshuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not solving any of the Steelers' problems. And of course, this reared its ugly head for the Steelers fan base with this latest move. They got rid of Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is viewed as a high-level quality safety, a good defensive back, and they simply added a good defensive back that's a veteran defensive back. What were they exactly doing in Pittsburgh? A lot of question marks there. How does this relate to Dallas? The biggest question mark with the Pickens deal was, do the Steelers know something about Pickens that nobody else does, right? We've seen Pickens histrionics. We know he can get a little fight sometimes in games. He's got a lot of Des Bryant kind of in him, and his demeanor and his aggressiveness. That's not always a bad thing, but sometimes you don't know from an outside perspective, are there things internal to a franchise, internal to a locker room that isn't really known? And then you add the player to your franchise and you're like, oh my God, there were all other kind of problems here. This is going to be a disaster. To me, that was the one question mark with Pickens, right? Did the Steelers know something Dallas didn't? And they were more than happy to get rid of Pickens. And then Pittsburgh, of course, also added wide receiver DK Metcalf, right? Another, I don't want to call him a diva, but, kind of that wide receiver model, kind of old school, Terrell Owens, Chad Johnson kind of thought there from DK Metcalf as well. They added him to their roster. And so it was sort of like, man, if the Steelers got rid of Pickens and they added Metcalf, how bad is Pickens? That was the concern in terms of being a locker room guy. But now with this latest move by Pittsburgh over the past week, now we know what's going on. The Steelers are just reshuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, right? They're not going anywhere. They clearly traded one diva, Pickens, for another diva in Metcalf, right? They had one veteran defensive back, Minkah Fitzpatrick, which they traded essentially for another veteran defensive back in Jalen Ramsey. They're just making moves to make moves. At least that's the way it seems, right? Minkah Fitzpatrick was a great locker room guy, was a great leader. There was nothing even potentially culturally wrong with him in Pittsburgh. Jalen Ramsey at times can make a little noise, maybe at times, at least from the outside, not the best locker room guy, not the best team guy, and yet the Steelers very happily made that swap. I think it's very clear that there's some issues, there's some weirdness going on with Pittsburgh. So the addition of Pickens, I think we can all rest easy a little bit and say, oh, okay, there isn't some underlying massive issue with the wide receiver that the Steelers really wanted to move on from. It wasn't like he was a total unequivocal disaster that was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, right? Like we saw with a former Steelers wide receiver Antonio Brown, right? There was none of that, or at least it doesn't seem like the Steelers knew of any of that kind of stuff going on, and they were happy just to unload Pickens on someone because they felt that was about to explode and just tear down their entire locker room. And they're more than willing to add another diva just as long as he wasn't nearly as close to as bad as Pickens, right? That was the theoretical concern. That's been put to bed. That's been put to rest, right? It's very clear the Cowboys, for lack of a better word, got a great deal from Pittsburgh because it seems like the Steelers just are doing deals to make deals, right? They're just kind of flailing, throwing around, trying to do whatever they can to maybe make Rodgers happy, to maybe make ownership happy. Don't know what's going on in Pittsburgh. A lot of weird stuff. But it's clear the Cowboys are making smart moves. They're taking advantage of opportunities as they're put in front of them. And look, let's give credit to Dallas here. I think a lot of people have looked at the Cowboys this offseason and obviously the continuing drama with Micah Parsons. Hopefully that deal gets wrapped up sooner rather than later. There are reports that it will get done before training camp. We'll see if that actually happens or not. But let's give the Cowboys front office and the ownership group, I know, a lot of credit here, because it looks like, based on what happened with the Steelers, that they really pulled one over on Pittsburgh and got a great deal, a great value, right? The deal looked good on paper. It made sense, when you just looked at the numbers and the analytics and the potential of Pickens, but you never know in terms of what's going on in terms of, the locker room dynamics, the relationship kind of stuff. It's clear to me that there was no issue there, or if there was an issue, it's with Pittsburgh, because it's a lot of chaos. It's a lot of shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. They're kind of just flailing around, making moves just to make moves. And because of that, the Cowboys were able to take advantage of the opportunity and get an elite number 2 receiver, or 1B, however you want to call it, to pair opposite of CeeDee Lamb, obviously with this powerful run game that's been brought into the fold with Clayton Adams, their new offensive coordinator from the Arizona Cardinals. This is a great job by the Dallas Cowboys, and I think we can put this big risk to bed. There were no big concerns there outside of what we already knew with Pickens. The Steelers are clearly flailing and struggling right now. The Cowboys, because of that, because of the issues with Pittsburgh, got a great player at a fair price, I would argue even a discount, and has put the Cowboys in a great position to be an explosive, powerful offense. Combining those both together, we saw what happened. I know Cowboys fans don't want to hear this, but we saw what happened when you get that dynamic in Philly. Special things can happen. I think the Cowboys look like they have that right now, and any other character concerns, any locker room time bombs that people were like, is Pickens bringing that to Dallas? We can put that to bed, because we've seen what's happened in Pittsburgh. So the Steelers, they didn't unload Pickens because he was a disaster waiting to happen. They unloaded Pickens because that's what the Steelers have done this offseason. They've unloaded players for whatever reason. Doesn't make sense. Cowboys picking up players for smart reasons. Once again, this Cowboys franchise kind of sliding under the radar, as weird as that sounds with Dallas, making a lot of really good moves across the board. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Cowboys fans, in the comment section below, we're talking locker room time bombs. We're talking about disasters. And boy, have there been some in Dallas if you look at historically. So I'm going to ask you this. Who is the biggest locker room cancer, the biggest locker room time bomb in Cowboys history? There's, of course, you can go back to the mid-1970s, the whole Clint Longley issue at the backup quarterback position. You can go in recent history. There are a ton of them. I'm going to make you pick one, though. What is the most significant, or at least the one that stood out to you, biggest locker room time bomb, locker room disaster in team history? Lord knows there's been a lot. Put it in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest news involving the Cowboys' acquisition of Pickens, and how it probably helps them rest a little easier knowing that Pittsburgh is kind of just flailing in the wind?
Yeah, Nick, I think, what you say is very apt, and I think the comparisons are good, but there's another one that's glaring big stands out to me is you look what they do at the quarterback position. They have, a more company man in Russell Wilson, a guy who's like all buttoned up, says all the right things, does all the right things, and then a talented, maybe a little bit underperforming, but athletically gifted younger quarterback in Fields, and they get rid of those guys for Aaron Rodgers, who's arguably much more controversial, much more. I like Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a great quarterback, but if you talk about in the news and the media lately, a guy that's definitely, turned some heads, definitely people will stick their nose up at him from time to time. So another example of Pittsburgh just going, okay, this guy doesn't work. Let's go grab this guy. And, it doesn't matter. Let's just, like you said, shuffling the deck chairs, getting guys in, getting guys out, trying to see what sticks. So I think this was, and the Cowboys were the first, I think, to go in and like take the gamble, say, okay, Pittsburgh's putting guys up there. Let's go take one that we like. Let's take somebody that benefits us, that we think is a good player, and just see what's going on. And to be the first one to take that gamble, it goes one of two ways. Like you said, the concern is, okay, is there something underlying about Pickens that we don't know yet, that we're going to have to, fall on that grenade eventually, is going to blow up the locker room, going to be a big issue? Or is it going to be, like you said, them just trying to make moves to make moves? There's a team that hasn't had a lot of playoff success. Their last playoff one, I think, is like 2016 or something like that. It's been a long time for the Steelers, almost 10 years since they've won a playoff game. That's not good. It's not a great look for, a storied, historically relevant franchise. They want more than that. So that's the tough part, is being the team to take the first shot, the first bite of the apple, and say, hey, what's going on? Is this a poison apple? Is this a good apple? Are we getting a deal here? And they did. They were the first ones to take it. And I think Pickens was the most upside player in these trades. Like you said, Jalen Ramsey, older veteran guy. I think he's a very talented player. He's not quite as good as he used to be, but I think he's still a really talented player. But Pickens was that raw athletic freak. We see him. He makes highlights all the time. He's a guy who has the most untapped potential. And I think he's going to be a big, big upside for Dallas. And kudos to them for being brave enough to say, hey, we see what's going on. We're going to go out and grab Pickens because we think this is a team that's floundering, that's really just trying to move stuff. And we can see through, hey, there's some veiled, underlying drama with Pickens that's too much to handle. No, that's not the case. The Steelers got too much drama going on right now. Love the Steelers. Great franchise. They got a lot of stuff to figure out. But I think this was a great move for Dallas. I think getting Pickens shows this team knows what's going on. And kudos to Schottenheimer and co., this new front office, to have the confidence to be early on their first, one of their biggest moves. I'd say the biggest move they made of the offseason when it comes to other players coming to this team, and taking a gamble, taking a risk, and it paying off. Already looking really good for this Dallas team. I'm excited to see him this season because this addition of Pickens, I think, is going to be massive for them going forward. I think we're going to see a lot of great stuff coming out of this offense in Dallas.